It was a dark and horny night. After the horrors of our Nordic adventure, my two surviving friends and I decided to unwind at our favorite local bowling hall, Holiday Lanes. Of course, we couldn't go bowling without the fearless bowling pro herself. Claudia's name was well known within the alleys, and for good reason. Her relentless striking capabilities struck fear into the hearts of lane enjoyers across the town. But tonight, we bowled for pleasure. At least we hoped to.
Let's go, gamers.
Ben exclaimed excitedly. They still hadn't fully recovered from the frightening ordeal in the north. Everyone clapped and headed straight for the gleaming entrance doors. The first sign that something was wrong was the pizza.
Oh, man.
Saskia groaned.
I was sure I'd be able to get a slice.
But it seemed she was doomed to starve. The iconic Pizza Supreme that welcomed guests far and wide was dark and shuttered. An eerie feeling washed over the group. Claudia broke the silence.
Come on, you guys. I'm here to bowl an amazing game. Get yourselves together and let's go.
There was no arguing with that. And with that, we shrugged and trundled down the stairs. They were slippery and wet with a mysterious substance. I assumed it was melted slush and spilled drinks, but it was strangely dark. I brushed off the weird liquid and set my sights ahead. The lanes glowed eagerly, calling to our basest urges.
All right, I'm getting a drink.
Claudia went straight to the makeshift bar. A small counter stood out from the corner. On the wall behind was a surprising amount of liquor, more than you'd expect in a humble bowling alley such as this. We all clamored to get our delicious drinks in our hands as soon as possible, but the bartender was nowhere to be seen. A shiver went down Ben's spine. This was most unusual.
Guys, I don't know about this.
Ben shivered.
Well, why don't we just serve ourselves?
Claudia proposed mischievously. I liked that idea. We started to reach across the counter, but something stopped us.
What are you doing?
The man behind the counter shrieked. We all jumped in surprise. Where did he come from?
Sorry, sir. There was nobody there to serve us.
Saskia explained sheepishly. The man hummed and stared at us for a few moments before a smirk crossed his weathered face. I didn't like the look of that expression, but I kept my mouth shut.
How about I offer you a deal?
He proposed, quirking his eyebrow at us.
What kind of deal?
Saskia questioned.
Free drinks all night long.
The man's smile widened.
All you have to do is beat me in a simple game. Free drink all night long?
Saskia said excitedly.
What a bounty!
Ben wasn't so sure.
I don't know, you guys. What if something bad happens?
We all rolled our eyes and ignored Ben. Free drinks! What could go wrong? Claudia was the first to act. She thrust her hand out towards the mystery man.
We'll accept this deal of yours, but the drinks start now.
The man clasped his hand in hers and they exchanged a binding handshake.
The deal is done.
He proclaimed.
I'll face you one by one and determine your strength. So long as you're playing, the drinks are on me.
We all grinned excitedly. This was a dream come true, especially after the harrowing blizzard we'd only just narrowly escaped. In our excitement, we missed the somber gaze coming from a figure at the virtual lottery terminals in the next room. Luckily, the hall was empty except for our little group. The man stepped out from behind the counter and ushered us over to the leftmost lanes. He was wearing a long trench coat and dark fedora. When he tipped it back, we could see his dark, beady eyes boring into us. His sparkling bowling shoes clicked across the floor as he strode to his lane. Saskia was up first. The man stroked his long mustache and prepared his shot. Bam! In a blink, all the pins had shattered into pieces.
We're done for, aren't we?
Ben chuckled nervously, but this was no time for jokes. Saskia recovered from her initial shock and set up for her move. She flung the ball from between her legs as hard as she could. It glided down the runway, straight towards the center pin. At the last moment, the ball veered off to the side and barely glanced the corner pin. It teetered for a moment, but stayed standing. The screens flared to life, displaying every bowler's worst nightmare. Gutter ball. The bowling pins on the screen stepped toward us, bleeding from their tiny eyes. The center pin took out a large decorative sword and committed seppuku. All the other pins took out tiny razor blades and killed themselves as well. The pins crumbled in a pile of bloody tissue.
What the hell?
Ben cried out in shock. As we watched in horror, Saskia fell to one knee and clutched it like Peter Griffin. An evil-looking, swirling portal opened up beneath her, and before she could say a word, she was sucked in. The portal closed behind her with a squelch. The floor was as smooth as a baby's bottom, with no sign of any strange disturbances.
Where the hell did you put Saskia?
Claudia demanded angrily. We all stared at the mystery man in fear and anticipation. A shudder ran through the group, but mostly Ben.
That's for me to know, and you to find out.
The man replied saucily.
Who's up next?
That would be Ben, but they were shaking too hard to hold the ball.
I don't want to die!
They pleaded, but it was their turn. We pushed them towards the lane as they trembled in terror. The scary man had his turn first. He spun the ball in a way I'd never seen before. It seemed to trace a strange pattern across the lane as it danced towards the pins. It hit the pins perfectly, and they exploded in a big fireball. Ben gulped loudly.
Come on, Ben. You can do it.
Claudia cheered.
Remember the drinks! Remember what it's all for!
That was all the motivation Ben needed. They wound up and sent the ball flying towards the pins. Unfortunately, they were still quivering in fright and couldn't control the trajectory. The ball bounced straight into the gutter. Claudia and I clutched each other in fear as we stared at the fateful message on the screen. Gutter ball. This time, the center pin turned on its fellows. It pulled out a sawed-off shotgun and began executing the other pins as they wailed and begged for mercy. Once every pin was lying motionless in another bloody heap, the center pin turned once more to stare at us before raising the muzzle of the gun to what would have been its head. In one loud blast, it exploded into smithereens. I ran forwards to try and save Ben from the same fate as Saskia, but it was too late. They fell in a pile of limbs in the Family Guy death pose. Just like it had before, an evil portal appeared and sucked them into the void. Claudia and I exchanged a heavy look. This wasn't looking good for us. Luckily, we had an ace up our sleeve. Claudia was next, and she was known across town for a reason. We patted her on the back as she squared her shoulders and stepped up to the ball return machine. Meanwhile, the mystery man had bowled another perfect strike. The fragments of his pins littered the neighboring lanes. Claudia breathed heavily and focused on her goal. She locked on to the center pin and began her approach. Step, step, throw. The ball leapt from her hand and soared down the lane. Strangely, it began to curve to the side, but Claudia was faster. The ball knocked into 2 pins and they crumbled to the ground. This was the raw strength of a champion. The mystery man glowered at her from the other side of the ball return machine. Now that I looked closer, his features seemed to have changed. His goatee was even longer and pointed, and his eyes seemed to glow in the dim light of the alley. Of course, everything was glowing, because it was glow bowling, but his eyes were glowing even brighter. An air of pure evil surrounded him. I stood up quickly.
Time to get another drink.
I rushed to the bar to refill my cup. As I stood at the counter, I heard a whisper from the dim room on my right.
Psst.
I ignored it.
Psst.
The whisper came again. I was busy drinking.
Hey!
A voice called out.
I can help you save your friends!
That got my attention. I made sure that my cup was completely full and walked carefully into the VLT room, making sure I wouldn't spill a drip. The whispers were coming from the corner. A shadowy figure was perched on a stool in front of a particularly interesting VLT machine.
Who are you?
I asked hesitantly.
My name's Allie.
Allie responded.
I'm on the VLTs almost every night. He doesn't like these virtual machines so much, so I've been able to keep a low profile. Huh? Who's he? Are you talking about the bartender?
I asked.
Ha!
Allie let out a loud laugh.
I guess you could call him that. All that matters is that I've been watching him and his little games for a long time. I know how to get the better of him.
This was intriguing.
Tell me more.
I said seriously.
Well, he likes to make these deals that he'll always come out on top of. He thinks himself especially smart at bowling. One might say this alley is his own personal playground. He entices people inside, only to defeat them and steal their souls. I used to try and warn people away, but the promise of free drinks was just too alluring.
She sighed sadly. I wondered how many groups she'd seen pass by the VLTs, unable to save them from this horrible fate.
Is there any way to stop this?
I asked desperately. I knew Claudia's turn was about to end, and I'd be next.
Well,
Allie considered.
if you manage to confound him, he won't know what to do next. His game relies on you bowling straight and true, if you can manage to knock down some pins in some other way, you might just be able to even the score.
I thanked her and quickly returned to the lane with my overflowing drink. I was filled with renewed hope. I hurried to tell Claudia what I had learned, but I was too late. Just as I got to our seats, Claudia's shot had gone straight through the hole she made earlier. She didn't hit a single pin.
No!
Claudia shrieked.
How can this be?
I stared in horror at the screens above us. The pins were morphing into monstrous creatures. The monsters leered at me with horrible fangs as the ghosts of the previous dead pins floated ominously into background. Blood dripped down the screen until all I could see was red. I knew what would happen next, but I watched anyways. Claudia fell to her knees in anguish at her failed shot and began sinking through the portal that appeared beneath her. Within moments, she was gone. I couldn't let myself succumb to the fear like Ben. I took a deep breath and downed my drink. I stepped purposefully towards the ball return machine and cradled the little orb in my hands. The man in the next lane chuckled darkly.
I hope you enjoyed the drinks. They'll be your last,
he proclaimed, and tossed the ball down the lane once more. But this time, something unexpected happened. His ball shuddered halfway down the lane, just like Ben always did when something seemed amiss. The ball spun pragmatically towards the gutter and shot forwards with the speed and confidence of a pro. Gutter ball! The screens flashed. The pins seemed to stutter and glitch, as though they weren't programmed for this outcome. The man pulled at his spiky hair and screamed in anger. Horns sprouted from his head, and a forked tail emerged from his behind. He seemed to grow several feet taller and emanated an evil aura. There was no doubt about it. The man was the devil.
What did you do?
He bellowed at me. I didn't respond. I sent a silent prayer to my fallen comrades for their noble aid. I wouldn't let their sacrifice go unnoticed. Confound him. Confound him. If I managed to confuse him enough, I just might be able to come back from this. A spark of inspiration suddenly struck. I knew exactly what I had to do. I approached the lane with purpose, but instead of throwing the ball, I paused.
What are you doing?
The devil shrieked in fury. I sat down and placed the ball between the soles of my feet. I drew my knees up to the sides and pushed forwards with careful strength. Slowly, the ball began trundling down the lane. The devil appeared to be at a loss for words. He gaped at this strange display, dropping his flaming pitchfork onto the ground. The ball progressed at a snail's pace. The tensions were so high. I bit my lip in anticipation and saw the devil do the same. After about a minute, the ball finally reached the pins. It wobbled towards the center right pin and made direct contact. My eyes widened in astonishment as the pins fell like dominoes into each other. I'd gotten a strike. The devil wailed in agony.
No! How did this happen?
With another loud squelching noise, my friends rose through the floor right where they disappeared. The devil was not happy. Before he could make any more tricky moves, I gathered my friends and we ran towards the stairs. The devil continued to scream in anger as we raced towards the exit. As we ran, I just managed to catch Allie's wink and thumbs up from behind the glow of the VLTs. We burst outside into the narrow parking lot, gasping and trying to catch our breath from another harrowing ordeal. Ben was the first to break the silence.
Next time, we're playing pool at Westside Charlie's, aren't we?
The whole group laughed in relief and continued on to the nearest bar to keep these good vibes going.